Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of Turn 2, an MLB betting show brought to you by GoldSheet and WagerTalk Media. I'm your host, Eric Pauly, the director of analytical content at GoldSheet.com, and I'm joined by my co-host, professional sports bettor Matt Joseph. Matt, welcome. I know I'm excited to tell for this first episode. I'm sure you are as well. How are you doing? Tell the viewers a little bit about yourself before we start diving into some of the amazing content we have for today's edition of the show.
It's nice to be here, and certainly somebody who's enjoying the baseball season, I guess, so far. Even though my team is not very good, the Philadelphia Phillies struggling a little bit right now, but it is June. As you said, I'm a handicapper, and I do some K props and a lot of pitcher props and hitter props. I like to focus in on individual players more than the teams, because I feel like we can do a little bit more of analytics with regards to them as opposed to just, relying on bullpens and things like that when you look at a whole team bet.
So that's a great segue into what we're going to be focusing on for the first edition of the show. Just a little background here. Obviously, we're going to do our best to give you some actionable info in terms of picks that you guys can make for tonight's slate, tomorrow's slate, maybe some series prices as well. We're also more so going to be talking some strategy when it comes to betting on things like strikeout props, hits, runs, RBI props, future bets, sides, totals, and more. So today we're focusing on strikeout props, something Matt and I both are huge fans of. So Matt, I'm going to toss it to you with a question real quick. This is a two-folded question, something that I know for a fact, and I know you do as well. Every single sports book out there, more often than not, they're putting different prices out there for every single K prop. So for starters, talk to me a little bit about your process in terms of a line shopping for K props. Then talk to me a little bit about, after you kind of evaluate which sports books have which price on which markets, what websites you're using or what resources, tools are you using, like you said, those advanced analytics, to come to these conclusions on what strikeout props do you looking to play?
Well, I mean, look, there's obviously some books that do it better than others. I mean, the ones that I use the most are FanDuel and DraftKings. Those are the ones that do the best job. BetMGM puts theirs out, it seems like, after everybody else does, and kind of waits for the line moves. So therefore, I don't really use that book. But it's very important for this strategy here to have different books. FanDuel has numbers that sometimes DraftKings doesn't. They also have different juices and things like that. And so it's certainly something that you want to look at, and you want to go into the morning with a number in mind, because if you go into this and you look at the numbers that are put out there and the juices and the way that the books want you to bet, it might influence things without you having a number in mind. So basically every morning I'll go into it and I'll be like, look, this is the number I'm looking for, which book has it, what juice is reasonable. I'm not very juice tolerant. So therefore, above a minus 150, I'm really not going to be very interested in a side. So therefore, I'm willing to pass on something. And some of the websites I like to look at. Obviously, I'm a Fangraphs guy. I like looking at this website called Pitcher List, which is a website that basically recaps a lot of the starts that pitchers have and basically tells you what went right and what went wrong. And then I'm also on the Roto Grinders website with their weather, because it's very important to find out weather. If there's going to be rain in the middle of the game, if there's going to be wind that affects Wrigley Field or some of the other stadiums, you need to know these sort of things. So those are kind of the websites that I like to look at, besides the individual player pages and seeing histories and things like that. I also have a database that I've kind of collected a little bit on all the K-props so far this season. So that way I know, hey, look, this is what they're good against. This is what they're bad against as we take a look at that.
Yeah, so I'm on the same page as you there. So how I kind of start my morning is when I open up Baseball Savant is where I start my day, go to the probable pitchers. And like you said, it's very important to already have a number in mind instead of, looking at the number that's already offered by different books and then deciding from there whether or not you want to go over or under. Because if I'm looking at, for example, today's slate, I see, Padres, Marlins, Jesus Luzardo. I look at myself and I think, okay, maybe I want to go. I would price it at 6.5. I look at FanDuel and I see it's ready at 6.5, and I'm not quoting that number. I haven't checked that prop today. I would obviously be a little bit more on the fence about playing that because the market's already kind of in line with exactly what I'm looking for. But on the other hand, for example, Pablo Lopez, I saw today, a 4.5K prop. I made that number 5.5. I'm already looking to bet that over because I already made that number in my head after, looking through and doing my preliminary research, seeing what the sports books have, and then going in that direction. So following up on that too, Matt. So looking at all the other books that are listed, I know obviously there's a plethora of other books and it's very state dependent. Here in New York, we have a pretty limited betting menu, but on FanDuel is the one sportsbook in New York where you can be betting alternate lines on K props without having to parlay it with something else in regards to that game. Do you ever take a look at the alternate K prop market? So instead of having to bet, 5.5, you could just bet 4+ and then maybe combining that with something else in that game? Or is that something you kind of avoid entirely and just focus on that set in stone number for K props?
Yeah, I don't really do the alternate ones because I'm not really looking to parlay things. The market is kind of variable enough that you just don't need to do that sort of thing. I mean, I've seen it a lot, and I'm not saying it's a bad strategy if there are people out there who like a certain pitcher and think that they're going to get to a certain number and want to pair it with the team to win or pair it with something else. It's just something I don't want to do because I think it's hard enough to get a K prop right. And now you're asking me to get a K prop right and something else. So I'm more sticking to the numbers that are out there than the alternate numbers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. I feel like, and tell me if you agree with me, that over the last 2 weeks, the K prop market, in my opinion, has sharpened up like entirely. Definitely in the beginning of the season, obviously less data for us, less data for the sports books. So I felt as if there were some softer lines. Have you been noticing a little bit of a shift in like a much more efficient K prop market recently, or how have you been attacking the market now with us and the sports books having a lot more information? A lot of these starters now have a third of their starts of the season. How has that been affecting your mindset as the season has progressed?
Well, yeah, and that's why you go into it every morning with your own numbers in mind, because if you stretch, I mean, these things are important. That's why also if you have one sports book that gives you 4.5 and one sports book that gives you 5.5, and you're more leaning towards the under, you want to take that 5.5. So I think the books are getting a little bit sharper. I think there's still some pitchers they're not very sure of. Shane Bieber, they continue to put up these 5.5s, and he's just not what he used to be. So you kind of have to take advantage of that. And occasionally they're going to get some numbers wrong. There's certain guys that when they put up a 4.5, you're looking at the under because you just know they're not going to go over that sort of thing. A Noah Syndergaard, Marco Gonzalez are, occasionally books will put these numbers out that don't make a lot of sense. But yes, the market for the most part is very good. It's just occasionally you have to take advantage of some mistakes that they put out there.
100%. Something I've noticed as well that's been very prevalent this season is a lot of these top prospects have been getting called up early, and the sports books have not having a real clue on how to price some of these players. For example, today, Tanner Bybee going for the Guardians. Now his K prop is at 5.5 against the Twins team that strikes out like no other. So that's made it there. But a good example has been Hunter Brown, Yuri Perez when he got called up, Bryce Miller. The list actually goes on and on this season where you're seeing 3.5s, 4.5s for some of these young pitchers who have shown that they have real nice K stuff in AAA or even AA in Paris's case. And there was a good opportunity in their first 1 to 3 starts to bet that over. And I also think you make another great point. You look at guys like Shane Bieber, even Dylan Cease this year, was a strikeout machine last year. There are instances where they're just putting out these high numbers and their stuff just isn't where it should be in terms of where it was last year, or in Bieber's case in 2020, where he won that Cy Young Award. Some of these pitchers just aren't the same pitchers. So I think that's a really great point, which leads to a next question. So looking at K props, obviously we have season-long numbers at this point, but baseball, there are so many ebbs and flows to consider. When you're looking to break down performances of the team that the pitcher's going against, are you looking only 1 week out, 10 days, 2 weeks? How are you kind of gauging the current form the team is in that they're going against? And how are you comparing that to their season longs? Are you throwing out season longs or only focusing to short or recent performance, or are you still using it all as like the big pieces to the puzzle?
Well, I mean, I think you have to throw out the first start or two usually because that's when these pitchers are coming off of spring training. They don't go as long. Their stuff is not as good. So you kind of throw out the first couple. But like I found that that it's very contagious. When you're able to make this database that I have, you see that there's long stretches where teams go over and then long stretches where they go under. So I think current form is very important for this sort of thing. When you look at the Dodgers, who have been an under team for quite a while, they didn't start out the season that way. So I think there is a contagious factor as to the unders and the overs. And with regards to the pitchers, certain pitchers have better numbers against certain teams. So you have to take a look at that. I like to look at, for Coors Field, I like to look how certain pitchers have done in their career in Coors Field and things like that. So I think it's a mix of everything, but I certainly kind of throw out the first couple of starts because that's when spring training happened. And it's so, different than what it is right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And then when you're looking at, like you mentioned, that Coors Field, I think is a great example. But say for, a veteran pitcher, are you taking into consideration home and road splits for their entire careers? And when you're focusing on K props for specific games now, or again, are you still focusing kind of in on the more recent data?
Yeah, it's situational and it's more recent. I mean, I'm not going to look at somebody for more than, a couple of years ago because I think, pitchers and players mature over this time. So, yeah, it's more of a recent thing when it comes to home and road. Of course, you're dealing with Colorado. That's a little bit different. But other than that, yeah, it's a more recency bias for something like that. Going back a couple of years, these pitchers are different. The balls are different. The batters are different, everything like that. So, yeah, I kind of try and stay as recent as possible.
100%. I'm on that same wavelength, and it's nice because we didn't really compare notes prior to this, but hearing how your process kind of aligns with mine, definitely a big fan. I see everything that you send over in the morning in terms of some plays you're looking at for pitcher outs, K props, of course, and there's been a bunch of times where you didn't even know it, but you and I were on the same page there. So last point on K props, just something to consider because it's something that I try to take into consideration is pitcher rest as well as bullpen rest. I think that's a major thing to consider, and I'll give a recent example actually. So last week the Mets were in Chicago going against the Cubs. Kodai Senga did not have his control that day, but being the strikeout pitcher he is, he was still getting his pitch count was running high. He was walking batters. The Cubs were doing a little bit of damage, but it was only like the fifth inning, and the Mets had somebody up in their pen. Senga finished that inning with about 90 pitches. And there was an internal debate that I was having if they're going to let him go or if they're going to, take him out of the game because he didn't have his stuff. But a lot of MLB teams don't trust their bullpens. They don't want to have their bullpens throwing innings and using up arms and pitches if they don't need to. So in that situation, Senga ended up coming back out and ended up pitching 100 plus pitches. Are you taking into consideration bullpen usage when evaluating starters for that same scenario where you would say like, yeah, maybe this player is going to have a longer leash because this bullpen isn't, because he has an extra day of rest and their bullpen is probably not in their best form? Or are you not even taking it to that step and are solely focusing kind of in on that starter and those matchups with the other team?
Occasionally, like if the Orioles were playing today, I'd look at the Orioles starting pitcher to hopefully go a little bit longer. They used pretty much their whole bullpen, it felt like yesterday. It's one of those things also where there's certain pitchers that if they're pitching badly, the team still leave them out there. Patrick Corbin, Jordan Lyles, Cal Quantrill at times. Like when you're looking at K props or even out props or things like that, guys could look terrible for a certain amount of time, and the team will leave them out there. Noah Syndergaard has done that sometimes. So I think you kind of have to look at what a manager has done so far with regards to some of these guys and look at their lines and look at how long they're in games. The longer they're in, that gives you more bites at the apple when it comes to Ks. I always like to do, when I see my pitcher going 6 innings, it gives me 18 opportunities to get a strikeout. So you do want to kind of look at some of these guys who have longer leashes when it comes to if they're pitching badly. Their managers allow them to stay out there a little bit longer. So yeah, that's something certainly I want to take a look at. Not so much the bullpen stuff unless it's really noticeable or really something where like they have an 18-inning game the night before, and so they need some extra length from the starting pitcher. Because most guys will still take a pitcher out if they're pitching badly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the point you made about pitch count is or longevity within the game is such a crucial factor because you can have some pitchers who, if you're looking at Baseball Savant and you see that their percentile rankings, maybe in like the top only 20, the bottom, I should say, 20% of strikeout rate, you see a line set at 3.5, but you have an understanding or a belief that they're going to go 100 plus pitches in that game. You kind of have to, not obviously don't always have to do this, not like a system or anything like that, but like I would definitely take a look at the over because if you're pitching 100 pitches in an MLB game, like you said, and you're going 6 innings, 18 outs, you're still, the odds that you're going to strike out for batters in that time period, I think is just a higher percentage chance. Of course, baseball, it's a very difficult sport. Obviously, for the hitters or professionals, the best, and the best of them get out 7 out of 10 times. But pitch count, I think, is a huge thing because, like you said, if you know their leash is going to be long, it doesn't really matter how good or bad they are at striking out batters. Just more bites of the apple and more opportunities for the strikeouts to pile in.
Yeah, and that's all you're asking for. And it's funny because I can't watch the game cast when I have overs, and I can't watch games. I'll say this: I don't watch any of the games that I have any K props in. I can't. It's very tough to watch because every time there's two strikes, you're sitting there sweating that you know the strikeout's coming and your under's toast, or you're sweating that third strike because you got an over. So whenever I basically see, like, I like to look at how long a pitcher's in, and I see, okay, he's been in 7 outs, or 7 innings. I think with 21 outs, I'll be able to hit my over. So it's just a funny way that I kind of approach these things. And I can't watch any of the games that I have K props in.
Sweating K props has become my favorite sweat. I know a lot of people love the no run, yes run first inning sweat. I'm sure that's a great one. I personally don't really dabble in that market, but watching K props takes years off my life. I swear it is so much fun because, like you just mentioned, if you have an under and you have a pitcher like 2 strike counts, pounding these 2 strike counts, you're sweating literally every single pitch. Umpire starts off with the obvious ball called strike. Then they take another pitch down the middle. It's 0-2. You're obviously sweating that big time. And then conversely, if you have an over, if the umpire is, maybe having a little bit of a smaller strike zone, the player who maybe induced a lot of whiffs is not getting those chases and those whiffs on some of these pitches, you could be in for a long sweat. But obviously, a sweat is all part of the game. But Matt, you were looking at a K prop for tonight in the Rockies game. We don't have a confirmed starting pitcher, if I'm not mistaken. But if that was confirmed in this time, since I missed it, please let me know. But talk to me about your thoughts on a K prop that's going in a game later today.
So to be completely honest, I found nothing for today. I don't like any of the pitchers. I didn't like some of the situations or anything like that. So if this is just kind of a lean for somebody who really needs something tonight. But the problem is we don't know who's starting. It's either Connor Seabold or it's Chase Anderson going for the Colorado Rockies. Both of them. It's ironic because FanDuel has one at under 3.5, and then DraftKings has the other at under 3.5. Arizona's a really good team at not striking out, and neither of these two pitchers are very good at striking guys out. And Arizona has a solid K rate against righties, a solid AK really low. So basically, it depends on who the starting pitcher is. I like under 3.5 for tonight's game. It's not a love. It's just a lean. If you have anything in the NBA Finals, go ahead, bet that. Like, if you're willing to sit out the night in baseball, as I am for my clients, you could certainly do so. But if you have to take something, once we find out who the starting pitcher is, and the other key, I guess, also is for something like this is on Thursdays, on Tuesdays for short series, on Sundays when you've got getaway days and things like that, always make sure to check the lineups beforehand because you might see backups. There's certain backups in this league who are not very good and not very kind to K-prop wagerers. So certainly that's another thing to consider here. Wait to see what the Arizona Diamondbacks lineup is, see how many starters are in there, how many backups are in there, and hell, who the starting pitcher is for the Colorado Rockies today. All those things can certainly come into play if you want to bet the under for either Connor Seabold or Chase Anderson.
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, a lot of what we do and mostly everything we do as sports bettors is trying to, make great guesses on what's going to happen in the future. But a lot of the times it is very lineup dependent. Of course, teams, you have an understanding of how they might put out their lineup versus a lefty or a righty versus who needs a rest day and who's in current form is playing well. But there are certain players who, if they're in or out of the lineup, is going to greatly affect looking at those K props, because if you have replacing somebody who's in the 5th percentile for K rate with somebody in the 95th, obviously those 4 extra at bats or 3 they might be getting against that pitcher, obviously decreases the probability that that player is going to strike out. But thank you for that lean there, Matt. Of course, you can find Matt on sportsmemo.com. And for something that I'm looking at for this actual weekend, I don't have a price up. I'm looking at the odds screen right now and still nothing yet. But I'm looking at a play on the Mets, depending on the line, in the series against the Toronto Blue Jays. That's going on at Citi Field tomorrow through Sunday. Toronto's getting the day off. Actually, neither of these teams have the day off. Toronto's playing today. The Mets are playing today as well. From a starting pitching matchup and looking at recent forms, I think that the Mets are going to be a better look this series. We got game 1, Verlander versus Chris Bassett. Bassett, of course, on the Mets last year. He had a good-looking start to this season from a ERA, like box score kind of look. But if you kind of peel back the onion, look at some advanced stats, his FIP and whatnot, he has not been really too great in those last 2 starts he's had. It's kind of showed that that regression was kind of coming. Verlander, of course, has not been great coming off the injury. But if we're talking about a Mets team who has the 3rd highest WRC plus in the last 2 weeks in the entire MLB, I'm thinking, even though Verlander is obviously older coming off the injury, I think that the Mets will be favorites in the game Friday. I would think that the Mets can steal game one. Looking at game two, we have Tyler Megill, Jose Barrios. I'll just simply give the edge to Toronto there if you're talking starting pitching. I think game three, you have Yusei Kikuchi going against Kodai Senga. The Mets are really good at not striking out against lefties. Kikuchi and Senga, both very big walk pitchers. But Senga's been the best pitcher on the Mets right now. Kikuchi, a much worse pitcher in his career on the road. So giving the Mets a very big starting pitching advantage in two of these three games leaves me, and I also, considering the strength of both of these two teams, I actually have the Blue Jays ranked higher in my power rankings than the Mets. I expect the Mets to just be slight favorites in the series, and I would take a look at betting the Mets for the series price heading into this 3-game set interleague at Citi Field this weekend. But Matt, thank you for the show. I had an absolute blast talking K-props with you. Any final thoughts for everybody? And what can they find? I know you said you have nothing for Sports Memo, but anything else going on for you at Sports Memo in these upcoming couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, basically a lot more K props and out props and earned runs allowed props, any sort of player prop market thing. That's what we certainly try and do. It's hard enough to handicap 9 innings, so basically, why not try and shrink the game down, do 5-inning bets, 3-inning bets, whatever. You can find all the specialty bets on my page at sportsmemo.com.
Awesome. And for the Gold Sheet, you can find our plays on WagerTalk and Sports Memo. Today we have a MLB prop / side 2-for-1 today on Thursday. We also have a daily MLB stat sheet that you can find on goldsheet.com, $15 a week, so $2 a day. We break down 4 games normally a day. We talk about some advanced stats, pitcher splits, how some of these batters on the teams do against some of these hitters, advanced metrics like FIPs, WOBAs, WRC pluses, so on and so forth. So let us do the work for you with the Gold Sheet stat sheet that comes out every single day around noon Eastern. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Thank you for your time, Matt, and we'll see you guys next time.